Welcome back. Why does British Prime Minister David Cameron want Britain to exit the EU? It boils down to four main objectives. He wants explicit recognition that the euro is not the only currency of the European Union so that non-Eurozone countries are not materially disadvantaged. He also wants a target set for the reduction of the burden of excessive regulation and extending the single market. He's seeking the restriction of access to in-work and out-of-work benefits to EU migrants. He does not want people claiming certain benefits until they have lived up to 4 years in Britain. Finally, Mr. Cameron does not want Britain drawn into further political integration. He wants Britain to be allowed to opt out from the EU's founding ambition to forge an ever closer union of peoples of Europe. But there's more than Mr. Cameron wants, one of which is that British police forces become free from EU interference, the removal of trade barriers in the services and digital sector to create a truly single market with specific protections for the City of London, and he does not want Britain being pressured to joining the euro. In Britain, opinions are mixed as to whether or not Britain should pull out of the EU. A recent poll conducted by a local newspaper in Britain showed that 59% of readers want the UK to leave. That's if the vote is held sooner than June, when the UK decides in a referendum. About 70 million Britons are quite undecided, though, about the Brexit. US President Barack Obama was in London over the weekend, and apart from diplomatic purpose of his visits, which is to strengthen ties with the UK, President Obama called on Britain to stay in the EU, warning that if they left, they would be at the back of the queue for a US trade deal.
The US Air Force One arrives in Britain, where US President Barack Obama hopes he can convince his friend David Cameron not to go ahead with a proposed exit from the European Union. But before talking business, his first assignment is to meet with Queen Elizabeth, who just turned 90. They would lunch privately at Windsor Castle before heading to London for that all-important meeting with Prime Minister David Cameron. By Friday, he is at number 10 Downing Street, where he is greeted by British Prime Minister David Cameron. During a press conference later, he encourages Britons to stay in the EU. Critics have said the US is meddling in Britain's affairs, but President Obama said he did not want Britain to miss out on the benefits of special relations both countries share.
I think it's fair to say that maybe some point down the line there might be a UK-US trade agreement, but it's not going to happen anytime soon because our focus is in negotiating with a big bloc, the European Union, to get a trade agreement done. And UK is going to be in the back of the queue. Not because we don't have a special relationship, but because given the heavy lift on any trade agreement, us having access to a big market with a lot of countries rather than trying to do piecemeal trade agreements is hugely inefficient.
Mr. Cameron said Britain should listen to its friends, and he could not think of any close ally who wanted an out.
This is our choice, nobody else's, the sovereign choice of the British people. But as we make that choice, it surely makes sense to listen to what our friends think, to listen to their opinion, to listen to their views, and that's what Barack's been talking about today. But it's also worth remembering as we make this choice, it's a British choice about the British membership of the European Union.
But President Obama's comment drew scorn from those who oppose Britain's membership of the EU, one of whom is the head of the out-campaign London Mayor, Boris Johnson, who says he does not want to be lectured by Americans about EU membership and that the United States would never countenance such a transfer of sovereignty.
I do think it's perverse that we're being urged by the United States to embroil ourselves ever more deeply in a system where our laws, 60% of them are now emanating from the EU, when the United States would not dream of subjugating itself in any way to any other international jurisdiction, and it's something to which the Americans would never submit their own democracy. America's a proud democracy built on principles of liberty, the idea of the sanctity of representation and no taxation without representation. It is very odd, it is perverse, it is hypocritical.
Meanwhile, many Britons have been supportive of President Obama's intervention.
He's looking at it certainly from a point of view as a friend of the country. I think he thinks he's recommending what's best for us. I don't think there's any sort of hidden agenda.
Well, it's entitled opinion. Obviously, he thinks we're better off being in the EU, so it's entitled opinion. Whether people in Britain agree with it or not, it's up to them, isn't it?
I don't know, I think it is a more than, although obviously the US isn't in the EU, they'll be affected by whatever the UK decides to do.
Back in America, Democratic presidential hopeful in the race to the White House, Hillary Clinton, has weighed in on the Brexit, saying she thinks it's a mistake for the UK to leave the EU and believes that the transatlantic cooperation is essential and cooperation is strongest when Europe is united. Those in the Out campaign say the UK will be in a more favorable position to strike a trade deal with the US if it left the EU. As it stands, the UK has not had a trade deal with America in 43 years. They say this is so because Britain is in the European Union.
When we come back after the break, we'll be discussing the possibility of a Brexit. Do stay with us.